If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those movies, those yet unheard.
Today we're going to have a conversation. This conversation it's for the revolutionaries and for the people, but that primarily will be for the revolutionaries, because we have decided to go over an old essay that Huey P. Newton wrote called The Correct Handling of a Revolution. We're going to go over the basic points that Huey got into in that essay, and then we're going to give our commentary on those points and on those ideas. So let's go on and get started. And for those who want to follow along, any true revolutionaries, especially Panther, should have these books. To Die for the People by Huey P. Newton is one of the books that you can find the essay in, and the Black Panther Speak is another one that y'all can find the book in. Hold on. There's another book that y'all could find, that y'all will be able to find this speech in, The Correct Handling of a Revolution. But we're going to get into it.
Well, if we're promoting books and stuff on the side, Black Students Guide to a Positive Education by Zach Kondo. Yeah, that right there. If you can find a copy of it, it's flipped back.
And why is that a good one for the people to read, Brother E?
Because it's bathroom reading. You can take it in the bathroom, and literally while you sit there and take care of your business, you can read a chapter, because they're only like a page or two long. And it's very, very, I don't say easy reading, but it's very light, and it gets its points across. I would make it put it on the same level as the Browder 5.
All right, that's it's a good starter then.
Very much so.
All right, now we're going to break this Correct Handling of a Revolution down into 13 points. 13 points that we're going to go over. So I'm gonna start like this. First thing. In starting the essay, the very first thing that Huey says is the black masses are handling the resistance incorrectly. That's the first thing he says. And one of the things that he talks about in that, I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but basically what he says is he talks about how the Watts riots and many other different riots that occurred in different cities, when usually it's something that the police have done to somebody in the community, the people respond off emotion. They essentially go to breaking into stores, turn things, y'all know what a riot look like, turn things up, setting things on fire, things of this nature. So Huey first starts out by saying that is the incorrect handling of a revolution. And he says that the people got that from somebody else, and they don't know who they got it from. He essentially saying, and this is a learning point right here. He essentially says that when people see activity that they respect, then they would turn around and imitate that activity. And that's where the people got this concept of handling a revolution from. Whenever they're upset, they just blow up in their own cities. And as we already know, we've seen this, we done had a few different riots, the George Floyd incident and many other different situations that have occurred recently in the news. So the first point that Huey makes in The Correct Handling of a Revolution is that the black masses are handling the resistance incorrectly. And so to express what it is that he means, he says essentially that when the brothers in East Oakland, having learned their resistance fighting from Watts, amassed the people in the streets through bricks and Molotov cocktails to destroy property and create disruption. They were herded into a small area by the Gestapo pigs, and basically they had their resistance shut down. So he says that this is the improper handling of a revolution. So what do you brothers take on the first point that we're going over, that Huey said in The Correct Handling of a Revolution? Point one, the black masses are handling the resistance incorrectly. Take y'all thoughts and takes on this.
First thing I would say is first off, and I say this to a lot of times to most people, is that we have to first identify and accept the fact that we are at war. If we don't identify as the people that we are at war and on the battlefield, then we're not going to approach the situation like a soldier. And then we have to recognize if we are at war, then we have to realize that we're dealing with a protracted war, which means a war that's going to be drug out, planned out long term, and potentially it be a generational warfare type of thing that's going on. And so, to me, until we first and foremost accept the fact that we are at war, and then be able to realize what type of war we're engaging in, then everything else is basically gonna fall by the wayside. Because if I don't even identify with the fact that I'm at war, how can I prepare and plan myself anyway? And so when I think about using the example of a riot, then what we're talking about is the people that are basically being energized through what I call a reactionary situation, and therefore they're going to act reactionary. They're not looking at it from a long-term battle. They're simply looking at it, hey, I'm pissed off right now, right this minute. What can I do immediately to extinguish that fire of being pissed, as opposed to not being emotional about it and realizing and accepting the fact that I am on the battlefield, and therefore I need to create and decide how casualties are going to be dealt with.
All right, true indeed. E,
Well,
you got anything to speak on that?
I take a issue with your favorite homeboy hero. I don't know how. So the riots and whatnot, especially today, don't have anything to do with the resistance. Don't have anything to do with even really rebellion. It's an emotional lashing out. If anything, it's a spigot. It's a way that the oppressor allows some of that energy and that emotion and that anger to be let off, so the mass of the people don't actually organize. So I can't really even say that that's an example of the masses of the people handling the resistance wrong, because it's not the resistance, number one. Number two, the people have never handled the resistance. Those that understand, those that are supposed to be guiding it and whatnot, are supposed to be handling the people, so that the resistance, so that the movement, so that all of that gets handled properly. So if anything, that's an indictment on those of us who were fighting or are fighting that fight, in that we didn't do our jobs, that we didn't handle the resistance correctly. And, even when there were riots and lashings out, and being able to take that energy and curve it into a proper direction, the masses of the people, that's what they're going to do. They're going to lash out because they don't have anything other than the emotional weight of the situation that they're in. That's all they know. We've mentioned it before. People don't really get involved until something personal happens to them. Their homeboy has to be messed up by the police. You see it all the time with like cancer research. Don't nobody start a cancer foundation or start wearing that cure shit until they've had cancer or their mamas had cancer. That's when they get involved. And that's what it is with the masses of the people. We don't get involved because we're individuals, because we don't understand. We have that Novocaine flowing through our blood now, like Malcolm used to talk about. We don't feel the pain of a brother over there because we don't realize that we're connected to the brother over there. We don't feel that until it hits close enough home, and then we have an emotional reaction to it. So I kind of agree and disagree at the same time with the statement. The masses handling it because we weren't handling it.
He's going to go to building. He's going to go to building on that a little bit. So you're not necessarily wrong. He's just taking it through certain steps in order to get to that point. So you're not necessarily wrong, E. So he starts off with the first point. He says that the black masses are handling the resistance incorrectly. Now here's the thing. Like Ward just said, we first must realize. We must psychologically make it real here that we are at war. And when the people don't understand that, then their responses will not necessarily be the responses of warriors. Now, what the point of view that I believe that Huey is coming from, reading a few of his thoughts and ideas previously before this one, is that he breaks it down that essentially what we call the black community is not actually a black community, but it's a colony. And it's a neo-colony, because just as people from other countries go into other people's countries, take over those countries, establish the infrastructure there, establish the police, essentially a police state there, and have that place while it may still look Middle Eastern, or it still may look Asian, or it still may look African, and you may even have an African in the so-called highest seats of powers, but the educational system, the economic system, even the political system is actually controlled by an outside oppressor. So that's a colony. And that's the same thing we find in the Black community. And when you understand that, and when you see it that way, then you understand that anything that we do that goes against the status quo is an act of that resistance, even if we're not conscious of it. Every move that we make, when the drug dealer sells drugs, when the robber robs, when the rioter goes to the streets to riot, as George Jackson once said, that's us trying to resist, because we have that natural imperative to have a desire to be free and to have power, and we don't have it. And since it hasn't been structured for us or taught to us how to go about getting it, then we do, like you just said, we respond emotionally. So we started out, we said the Black masses are handling the resistance incorrectly. And all three of us just gave y'all our commentary on it, and all the ideas are right, they're correct. We're not arguing with each other, but there are different ways to go about viewing the concepts and the statements. So the commentary is 100% correct. Now going to what he just said, he goes to building on that idea. One, we learn something from this when we see what the people are doing. And I just said it, that nobody knows who threw the first Molotov cocktail. No one knows who was the first people to go out into the streets and go to turn things up in the community. But the people start doing it, and every time the people get angry and upset, that's the first action that they take to. So he was understanding that, and when you see that, then he says that then we got to understand that the party, who is supposed to be the oxen of the people to ride to freedom, the party has to utilize the same method. He says that when you understand that the same way that they are following whoever started the ride as a way of resisting, the same way the people saw that, the people are only respecting activity that they saw, and then they decided to participate in that activity. So he's saying that it's the party's responsibility to give the people the proper activity to see, to look at, to observe, and then the people can then participate in the correct activity. As you just said, you 100% correct, that the people do not handle the revolution. The people are supposed to be taught by the revolutionaries how to handle the revolution. And if the revolutionaries are not teaching the people, then the revolutionaries are failing at their job. I want to say this before I move to the next point. I can even see how he said that the people, the Black masses, are handling the resistance incorrectly. I would say that the so-called revolutionaries are handling the resistance incorrectly, because in today's time, the so-called revolutionaries see that it almost seems like they see that the apex of any revolutionary resistance is protesting. And I don't think that is the apex of revolutionary resistance. I just don't believe that. I don't believe I don't think that we can look in the history of any group of people and see them getting free through protest. Protest is a strategy, it's a technique, it's a tool, and it's one of the many tools that you may use, but it cannot be the apex of your activity. And if you think it is, then you are handling the revolution incorrectly. I want to add that with that first statement of the Black masses are handling the resistance incorrectly.
He said,
go ahead.
That doing anything that can be used against the people is counter-revolutionary. And the reality of it is, the riots, especially today that we see, but even back then, but more so now, because the oppressor has become more, what is that word? Sophisticated and his handling of it. And the reality of it is, rioting and whatnot, especially in today's climate, is counter-revolutionary simply because so many of them, and we have no idea who and how much, are backed and funded by the oppressor. So they're no longer, these pop-ups and shit are not even the pure, it's a strategy by them.
Yeah.
So that they can turn around and lock us up. And so and that's why I say there's got to be a detachment between those who get it and those who are just pissed off. It's like being in any relationship. Emoting at your partner, at your husband or your wife, and just lashing out and swinging and shit that's not beneficial. That's not helpful. That's not, addressing the issue. That's you getting shit off your chest and then going back to work the next day. But anyway, my bad. Go ahead.
Okay, so part two that he gets into in this essay of the correct handling of a revolution is he said that, and it goes to what you said previously, E, that it's an indictment on the revolutionary mechanism itself that the people are doing it this way because the revolutionary is not doing their job correctly. But he said point two will say, when the people learn that it is no longer advantageous for them to resist by going into the streets in large numbers, and when they see the advantage in the activities of the guerrilla warfare method, they will quickly follow this example. But first, they must respect the party which is transmitting this message. So the first thing that must happen is that the party must be respected by the people so that the people can observe the activity of the party and want to participate in the activity of the party. So he says that, so second point, it is not necessary to organize 30 million black people in primary groups of 2s and 3s, but it is important for the party to show the people how to stage a revolution. He says that there are 3 ways that a person can learn. They can learn through study, they can learn through observation, and they can learn through experience. Since the black community is composed basically of activists, meaning people that prefer to act other than study, he said that observation of or participation in the activity are the principal ways that the community learns. He said to learn by studying is always good, but the experience is better. Because the black community is not a reading community, it is very important that the Vanguard group be essentially activists. Without this knowledge of the black community, a black revolution in racist America is impossible. So that's the second point.
Well, let me say this about that. That still goes back to me when we talk about getting the people to recognize that they are engaged in a war. And so when I think about the Black Panther Party, then and even now, that is what the nature of handing out the 10-point platform is supposed to be, is to help the people engage and realize what needs to be done and why it needs to be done. And so that is like a starter introduction into the fact that this is why things are going the way they are, because we don't have a format or a blueprint or anything to see that we are are dealing with gaining our own freedom. We're not as a people, as a race of people, we're not sitting at the seat of the table of power. And so if I'm not sitting at the seat of at the table of power with in a situation where I can confront my quote unquote oppressor, then I am basically inferior. And if I'm approaching anything from the standpoint of being inferior, now all I can do is beg and plead and hope that they have mercy and want to change on their own. But if I approach power with power, then I'm now in a position where they have to recognize that, and that anything that they do to me, there's going to be consequences for those actions. And so having power from that standpoint gives me the ability to be able to implement a consequence to you hurting me or you doing something against me. And so as a revolutionary from that standpoint, we have to be able to first and foremost get the people to identify and accept the fact that we are at war. And if you're at war and you're not doing anything to defend yourself, then you are allowing yourself to be killed and destroyed. And so therefore, that's going to be something that affects each generation. But if I'm not able to see that as the case, then when I get attacked, I won't view it as an attack. I just view, I don't know what you call it. If I don't even realize that I'm being attacked, and when something happened to me, then how can you organize the people to stand up and fight against something that they haven't identified? If you can't identify a weapon that's being used against you in any form, physical, mental, spiritual, psychological, if I don't even see it as a weapon, then I can't refer to it as an attack. So even though I'm getting beat upside the head with a bullet club by a cop or shot in the back by a cop, if I don't identify that as a direct attack on me because of who I am, for the sake of oppressing me, because I don't have power, then anything that happens beyond that is not going to yield anything that can be utilized for my liberation.
True indeed.
Well, that brings us right back around to at least for me, what I always tend to harp on. You can't convince the people that we are at war because if you tell me that we're at war, I'm going to tell you I'm not at war. I got a good job. My bills are paid. I got a nice car. You know, got a nice house. I can buy all the red bottom shoes I want. I can take trips. Da, da, da. So I'm not at war. I don't know what you talking about, but I'm not at war, dog. You know, I'm good. Kids go to a expensive charter school, whatever. I can walk around here doing blah, blah, blah. I'm not at war. So we're still dealing with the concept of the I, which is something that Huey and them were just starting to experience back then, but has been, you know, fast forward to today, it's the status quo. We can't identify with each other. So I can't even begin the sentence with we, you know. So this paradigm shift and understanding, you know, even looking at the war, the way they trying to approach it from the oppression, because that's essentially what the party has always done. We keep getting fucked up by the police. We ain't got this. We ain't got that. I personally don't want to hear that shit anymore. I don't want to hear what we ain't got. Let's talk about what we had, because if you tell me we ain't got and try to blame somebody else, I'm saying, nah, nigga, that's because we ain't shit. And you can't, in my mind, I can't prove otherwise because I've never known black folk to have shit. All I've known is oppression. All I've known is not being able to pay the bills. All I've known is doing bad. So for you to try to convince me that there's something else, that's a hard sell. And that's why going back to culture, it's like you talked about neocolonialism, which I think was Kwame Nkrumah, who kind of coined that phrase back in like the 60s to talk about how Western powers, when, you know, all of the liberation of various, or supposed liberation of various countries on the continent was going on right alongside Malcolm and everything that was happening here. What the European did in South Africa, perfect example, is the European said, okay, you can have the politics, you can, you know, sit in the seats of power, you can decide this, decide that, but we're going to hold on to the money. We're going to keep our vested interest. We're going to keep a stake in the money that you make. We're going to take that money, do what we want, and keep you in debt by keep making you loans and all this other shit coming to help with military, all this shit. We're going to keep you indebted. And that's what they do in our communities. I mean, let's face it, they gave us black councilmen, black mayors, black governors, but at no point have we ever had it returned to us, in a sense, once it was taken with all the integration and all of that. Prior to that, it was a different story. But since then, it's been, the story has been that they are still oppressing us through the economics. So it's the same game, the neo-colonial status, that the same tricks they use there, where they make loans from the what is it, the World Bank. They make loans to entire countries like Nigeria or, you know, Kenya, whoever, and then make it so that the interest rate keeps them from being able to pay it back. They do the same thing to us with pawn shops and paycheck loans and instant loans and shit and whatever else we're doing. They keep us in debt. So they kept the purse strings. And so we have to have it on some level, at some point, we have to be able, the masses of the people, before we can talk about war, before we can talk about handling this and handling that, the masses of the people have to be reminded that we're not individuals, that we're not at war as individuals, that this is a group process. But that's a part of culture. And as long as they control the purse strings, as long as they will control the mindset of the masses of the people, and we're going to continue to be in that mindset of individuals. That's that black face, what is it? A culture of blackface. I forget what we called it, but basically black culture. How there's no black culture. There's just us putting the black face on their culture because we do the same things. We exploit each other the same way and think that is progress because we're moving up with them. So we still don't identify what Brother Davis said. If we valued each other, we wouldn't need money. We don't get that because we don't value each other. We have no reason to value. I can get my bills paid without you, nigga. Fuck you. I don't need you. I don't need a man. How many times you heard that? I don't need a man because my man is this corporate business that I work for that's paying my bills. My man is the police that comes and makes sure your black ass don't come around here no more. And the court system that punish you for trying to be a part of your children's life. So these are things that, Huey and them weren't dealing with them in the way that we have to deal with them. This is day-to-day life for the masses of people at this point. This is the everyday struggle. Is the individual trying to survive in this system is crazy, and it'll never work for African people.
So
what was the point? I forgot what he said.
A takeaway that I got from the way he would break this down, because the point was he was saying that the people are using these quote unquote rides as their ways of resisting because they got it from somewhere and somebody. And he talked about understanding the psychology of how the people operate. The people operate basically when they see somebody doing something that they respect, the people then imitate that. Like for instance, sagging. I don't know who the first person to sag was, but one of the things that you do when you're young and you walking through your neighborhood is that you look up to the dudes that are admired and respected in the neighborhood. And since you want that same level of admiration and respect, you tend to start doing the same things that they're doing. When you have no clues or cues for how to move into manhood, you go to looking around you for the people that you think or see as men, and you start imitating them. This is basically essentially what Huey is saying. And when you understand that, then you could take a formula for that. He's saying that the party has to participate in activity that the people respect in order for the people to observe that activity and then participate in activity. He's saying that a revolutionary has to understand that people learn through one of three ways. They either learn through reading, observation, and participation. And he's saying that basically we lose one of those because for the most part, the black community is not a reading community. On average, if you walk up to the average person that you see in the street, the average black person, and say, hey, what are you reading right now? They'll probably tell you nothing. And matter of fact, just to remove the color thing off of it, statistics say that the average person will never read another book after they leave school. So the average person doesn't read another book after leaving school. The average reader reads about one book a year. The average person that will read after school read one book a year. By understanding that, then we start to get an understanding of how to get to the people. We can't get to them by getting them stuff to read. The ideas of not seeing each other as individuals and as a group is very important, but you can't get that to them by getting them the bridal file because they're just not going to read it. So you have to get them the activity through the party's actions that they can respect. And they'll automatically, once they see the activity, then they'll say, I want to participate in that. I want to participate in that activity. One of the things that I think it was Bobby that said it. He said that we're going to march through the streets with our guns. Now you got to understand that this was just a strategy. It was just a strategy. It wasn't the end all to be all of Panther activity. And you tend to see a lot of dudes calling themselves revolutionaries and Panthers. All they want to do is tote the guns. All they want to do is do the training. But this was just a strategy Huey was using. Bobby told Huey, he said, man, if we walk through the streets with the guns, the media is going to paint us as thugs, to the news media. And Huey said, that's right. He said, but here's the beauty. We're trying to reach the brothers on the block. So when the media paint us as thugs, that's not going to scare the brothers on the block because they're going to be like, they've been calling us thugs forever. Those are thugs. Let's check them out. Oh man, them some out of sight thugs. They're in the face of the police with weapons. I like those thugs. Let's go over there and see what those thugs are doing. And it was a strategy in order to pull the average street dude out of the streets and into political activity. So it's basically the principle that the people learn through observation and then participation. Once they observe activity that you're doing that they respect, then they'll want to participate in that activity, and that's when you give them your reading material. That's when you get them, tell them, hey, this is your reading list. This is your book list. This is what we're having to study. You have to get these things read before you can carry a gun in the field. That's when you implement things like that. But you can't get them your reading material off the top because the black community is not a reading community. That's the takeaway that I get from that point. And by understanding that there's a formula there that all revolutionaries can learn how to use. That's how you teach and educate the people. Go ahead, E. I saw your hand up.
And I'm with the whole, the look. I get that. There's a certain amount of pageantry and showmanship. What's his name? Abby Hoffman, this white dude. White people back in the 60s, they talked about political theater. That's to grab the imagination of the people to get them to say, "Oh, what's that over there?" However, and this is a part of, to me, and I think War, somewhere in this little Warridian mind, to say there are a lot of African folk in this country who do read. That's a socioeconomic class of African people in this country, like those who shall remain nameless, said, I ain't reading no books by no dead people. There are a whole bunch of black folk who love to read. So the idea is also getting those folk to read the right thing, having those conversations and tapping into that's the whole intelligentsia or whatever. That's that cleave that happened with the US organization and the Panther Party. Because by and large, those who were in the culture stuff, they were into reading. That's the route I came up with, was basically culturalists. They were into reading. But one thing that turned me off, and not really turned me off, but had me wanting, was the fact that there was no activity. You know, we read all this stuff about how dope we were, da-da-da-da-da. Let's go do something about it. Let's go build a pyramid. Let's go, whatever it is we got to do, let's go do it. And so there has to be this reunification of the upper and the lower. What do you call it? The yin and the yang, the conscious and the subconscious mind. That's all we're really doing, is finding ways to tap into that subconscious mind, because all of that shit that we did, you know, thousands of years ago, building things and civilization, inventing, all of that shit, we still have. Because those lessons, those ideas, those abilities didn't come out from space somewhere, despite what white folk try to say. We didn't just snap our fingers and know how to do this. This shit came from within. It came from out of us. So getting those two back together, the theory and the action, has to be a primary concern. You know, we a lot of times in the party, because that's our niche. It's grabbing cats in the street, in part because, I don't know, whatever reason. But we have to be able to reach beyond that niche, because cats in the street ain't gonna win the revolution, ain't gonna win no fight. Huey and them pretty much proved that, because they walked out with their guns and got lit the fuck up. That's it. That's what happened in a nutshell. You know, and I think some of them at some point, you'll acknowledge we were too quick to put up the bravado and put our chests out there, and we didn't have the backing. You know, because self-defense and all of that doesn't start with a gun. It ends with a gun. It starts long before that. So there has to be some bringing back together of those who will read and understand what's going on, as well as those who are just eager to get out there and put their feet on the ground. Got love and respect for both, but we're doomed with that being split, which is a part of the strategy.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Now, I would think that the mistake that they made, because, you know, when I first read this years ago, I read it and I'm thinking to myself, he knew it, but he didn't imply it. So it's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. You know, more hitting the streets with the guns was a beautiful strategy. But when it became an all-time thing, that's when the strategy became it became useless. Basically, it became a useless strategy, all like we see nowadays. But there are people who was members of the New Black Panther Party, and then they left the New Black Panther Party because they was more concerned with the training and carrying the guns. So that's when that strategy becomes a flaw or an error. And one of the things that I think that we need to look at when it comes to dealing with that strategy, after you've used the strategy to catch the attention of the people, now you have to start the teaching. You have to start the education. You have to start Yes, I don't think you're listening to me, E, because one, you said there's a lot of people that like to read because you have been in the circle with a lot of people that like to read. But I said on average, yes, there are people walking around with one leg, but on average, the average person has two legs. Let's just be real about it. Yes, there are people walking around that are blind, but on average, the average person can see. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying on average, the average person does not read. And I think that you know that. I think you know that intuitively, because as many times as we've been out in the field trying to get people to read and sharing information. One time we was at the Park and Stop 6 and we gave a 10-point platform to a brother, and he took that 10-point platform and balled it up in our face. So we have to be we have to practice the reality habit. Reality is not the way things should be. Reality is not the way we want things to be. Reality is the way things are. And we have to make decisions and create our strategies based on that. And that's why I agree with the point that Huey is making. That one, you got to understand the psychology of the people. People learn through reading, through study, through observing, and through participating. Then he said, then you got to understand that the people that we're trying to reach and trying to wake up to understanding where we are, that we're at war, that we have been oppressed, that we live in neo colonies, to get these red bottom people, as you just described them a few minutes ago, to understand what situation they're in, that we have to do it not through getting them reading material first, but getting them the correct activity to observe and then to eventually participate in. Once you get them the correct activity to observe and they respect your movement, then they'll want to read your material. I'm gonna use this for an example. When I was on vacation, and there was a small group, there wasn't a large group of people. All black men wasn't saying, "Hey, I want to be on that conscious stuff y'all on." There was a small group, and what caught their attention, and I know what caught their attention, because you got to understand how we as people, as human beings, operate. What caught their attention is they liked and respected the way that the people that was really conscious was able to move, the way that they talked, the way that they expressed themselves to the administration, the way that they had a solution to problems when they came up. They respected that. And because they respect, say it again.
That's exhibiting power.
Exactly.
They saw power.
Exactly. They observed power and then they wanted to participate in it. So then they would come and they would say, "Hey, what can I read to get on that level? Hey, what kind of practices do I need to start exercising to get on that level?" They observed it and then they wanted to participate in it. That's the point that Huey is making, and that's the point that I agree 100% with Huey on, because I doubt that if you're going to be able to walk out into the streets and get an average person walking down the street a copy of the Brodifier and say, "Brother, read this, it'll change your life." I guarantee you're probably not going to get a lot of good results from that.
Well, let me say,
it's not fair because we already did that.
Well, let me say this, because let's bring this back to the modern times now that we're dealing with. Because we have to realize that when we talk about getting the people to see what's going on, remember that social media has been weaponized against the people. So the average person is getting their information, what they think to be information, through social media.
True
so
indeed.
Talk about being able to provide and use social media as an outlet to bring the message to the people. The biggest thing that's coming across social media, especially through the analytics, is going to be you're going to be bombarded all day long with nonsense and with illogical stuff, to the point to where, how do you get the average person to even realize and want to become politicized? Because it goes back to me, identifying the fact that most of our people don't recognize what liberty, the concept of liberty, even means. Like when you even just go to the United States and say, "Give me liberty or give me death," does that resonate with the average black person? Because we don't recognize the difference between liberty and nationalization. So we get behind nationalization because that's what we're fed and that's what we've been taught from day one in the public school system. You're going to pledge your allegiance to what? To the United States of America. And then you go into that, and all our children are taught and indoctrinated in that naturalization, to the point to where we don't see ourselves as black people separate from what's going on in the United States. We view our conditions as black people in the United States in terms of fighting oppression as a situation where some white folks are just racist. And so what we need to do is have individual fights with white folks that are racist and try to remove them from office or remove them from positions of power, as if it's not an institutionalized or system or systematic position of oppression that's being created. And because we don't see that, the reason it maintains and will continue to maintain is because we don't have power. We don't recognize we don't have power because we don't understand the concept of sovereignty. We don't understand the concept of nation building. We don't understand the concept of seeing ourselves collectively as a people that need to be able to unify around something that will give us power so that we can be able to even address these conditions of war.
Well, and Huey talks about all these in these next points, but let me say this next point. I agree 100% with you. The next point he says, he talks about the main function of the party. Because what you're saying to me, War, is it kind of goes back to how Brother E started. He said, well, that's a self-indictment right there. That means that the revolutionary organization is not doing its job. So everything you just said is the responsibility of the party to actually get that message across to the people. If the people don't know that, then it's a self-indictment on the party itself. The party has been existing for decades and the people still doesn't know this. Then that means that the party is handling the revolution incorrectly because the message is not being taught to the people. So Huey said, my next point, Huey says the main function of the party, the main function, I'm not going to ask y'all what y'all think it is because I don't want to put you on the spot. Some may think that the main function is protesting. Some may think that the main function is bucking the police. Some may think that the main function is training and carrying weapons around. Many of these people really believe this. But Huey said, who could be considered one of the godfathers of Panther ideology, period. Huey said the main function of the party is to awaken the people and teach them the strategic method of resisting a power structure which is prepared not only to combat with massive brutality the people's resistance, but to annihilate totally the black population. So that's the next point. He said the main function of the party is to awaken the people and teach them the strategic method of resisting a power structure. And he told us in the point before that how to do that. And that was the understanding that the people learned through observation and participation. So that's the main function of the party. What do you? I see your lips getting ready to move, War. So I know that touch. Go ahead, get in there.
We're calling this strategy, right? So I'm gonna go back and quote something from Robert Greene. The first point on the 33 strategies of war is declare war on your enemy. You cannot fight effectively unless you can identify them, learn to smoke them out, and then inwardly declare war on your enemies and fill them with purpose and direction. So, like I say, if the people are not realizing and seeing an enemy as an enemy and realizing they are at war, and what we're doing is if we're not able to bring that across to the people, if we're not giving them something to remove, in other words, I look at it like this. This is what we call a foundation. Dave used to talk about a foundation. You can't snatch a foundation from somebody unless you can find something to replace it with. The people are not willing to let go of a foundation. So that's why I talked about the concept of nationalization. We're taught from day one through naturalization of the United States, that's who we are. We the people. So we don't see ourselves as a separation from everything that the United States has built itself up to be. And since we don't, we can't possibly identify when we get attacked here in the United States as it being an enemy. That's me attacking myself. And if I'm attacking myself, then all I need to do is reform. I just need to change a little bit of this, change a little bit of that, and things will get better. And so as long as we see it that way, again, because we're not identifying ourselves as a people, and that goes back to what he always hit on about identity and culture. As long as I don't see that, then anything that I fight against is going to be based upon individual situations, and it's going to be remain as individual situations. And that's even obviously part of the tactic that they use against us, is to keep us thinking that it's not systematic, that this is just some crazy nutcase, that and that person is going to get punished and be a scapegoat, and then things will be all better. So we keep falling for that same okie doke as if we're not being oppressed because we don't have power.
One of the issues with I guess the only issue, as far as things like, Huey and them with the gun, the reality of it is that was shock. That was a shock value that caught people's attention. Fast forward to whatever year this is, How do you shock motherfuckers that have access to YouTube and TikTok and all of that shit? How do you grab the imagination of the masses of the people when the imagination of the masses of the people has been completely whitewashed, has been manipulated and controlled to the point that, you know, people getting their heads cut off, whether it's real or not, on YouTube was a thing. It was something that, you know, people tuned in to see that shit, or a mass murder at an elementary school or whatever. We are numbed to this shit, to the shock value. You can hold a rifle out there if you want to. It's really not that big a deal anymore. So I think what's key is figuring out how to get the attention of the people, the imagination of the people, which again, for me, goes back to us exhibiting things that are, you know, if when my mom's was a teacher years ago, one of the things, and I know we probably had other teachers that did it, but I watched her do it in her classrooms when the class was rambunctious and rowdy and the kids were talking, da 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 da. She just started talking in a normal voice. Da 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 da. I need y'all to sit down. We're gonna do this as soon as you get back in. And one or two would catch on. What is she saying? I can't hear what. And then a few more. The kids would start turning and looking because she's doing something so dynamically different from what's going on over here. It actually caught their attention and they started to tune in. They figured out, I got to be quiet a minute to hear what is she saying. So doing something, anything that's in competition with the oppressor, in my mind, is not going to work because they've got the resources. They can outdo us on any of that shit. So, you know, rallying people and getting our people to identify with who we are, you know, before the Robert Greene law of power that you mentioned, the first rule of learning is know yourself. Because I can't convince you of who your enemies are if I can't even convince you of who you are. You know, you steady fighting for something, like you were saying, nationalization. You fighting for something that's actually your enemy because you think that you're a part of that thing. And we still have confidence and faith in that thing. So we can't identify as anything else. So yeah, I mean, I agree, do something that catches the people's imagination, but it can't be the same old shit. When's the last time that the same old shit caught anybody's attention? It never fucking does. So doing something counter to that, something that's completely different, something that is just thrown off in the mainstream mindset is probably the things that we should be exploring and looking into as how we can incorporate those things into what it is we're doing. Being very quiet in a room full of loudmouth motherfuckers is the best way to be heard a lot of times.
And you know, something to think about. You said, how do we? You said that the first rule of knowledge is to know self, without a doubt. And even before knowing who the enemy is, we need to know who we are. You know, Sun Tzu talks about that in the Art of War, where he talks about you have to know yourself, know the enemy, and know the terrain. So you have to have a deeper understanding of these three things in order to be in a position, in order to be in war and have 100% chance of winning that combat. Because you lower your ability to win when you don't know the terrain, when you don't know the enemy, and when you don't know the self. But here's the thing. How do we, this is not a question, this is just a thought for the mass of the people listening, because I know that E will probably take off for the next 30 minutes trying to describe and explain this. But how do we, because I understand the importance of culture. I understand it. And I didn't get that, I did get that understanding from reading, studying, and building with Black people, but they're not the only people that's saying it. I mean, I always bring up the dude, Kirk Harrod, Dr. Kirk Harrod, a Jewish historian who wrote a book called Who Are We? And he got a chapter on culture. And he talks about how important culture is for a group of people to be successful in any environment. And he says that essentially one of the rules of history, because that's the way he breaks the book down, that the rules of history that history has taught us. And one of the rules of history is that if you take a group of people's unique culture from them, it all but dooms that group of people when dealing with society, because we got to understand that all groups of people are competing for resources on this planet. And he used it as an example, Black people and Native American people as two groups of people who all but had their culture completely eradicated, and talks about the position that these people play in the society to today, being on the lower rungs of society. But, and this shocked me. This shocked me as a youth in my younger years, in my early 20s, when I came into the new Black Panther Party, that so many people in Black uniforms who had joined the Black Panther Party, who had joined the new Black Panther Party, who had done these studies, did not see the value of culture. I mean, hell, point number 5 in the original platform, and I think it was still point number 5 in the new Black Panther Party's 14-point platform that we was operating off of then. That point number 5 said, we want education for our people that expose the true nature of this decaying American society. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in present day society. If we're not talking about culture, what the hell was they talking about when they sat down and wrote this? You know, you really have to ask yourself this, because I know me and E, we sat down and we analyzed this point to death. We analyzed this point, broke it down. It's almost like we were trying to see, are we missing something? Because evidently these brothers are seeing something in this point that we are not seeing. Because this point is saying everything that we're screaming and arguing for. But, you know, I only brought that up because I think that's extremely important. Without a doubt, E, I think it's extremely important for any revolutionary organization to understand that the introduction of our culture back to our people is the primary step that needs to happen in order for a group of people to even start moving towards their liberation. It's completely impossible to do without that, because as you always like to say, E, that you cannot move toward a group of people toward liberation until they stop seeing themselves as individuals and actually start seeing themselves as a group, as a collective. Okay, the next point.
Wait, man, you got to give me something on that. I want to talk. I want to real quick talk about that aspect of the platform. One of the things I would say that I've realized over the years in regards to the 10-point platform, and I've just learned this just from drilling members on it, is that people will memorize it, but they don't embody it. And to memorize something don't mean that it becomes part of you. You just can recite it. But then if you ask somebody, well, what does this mean to you? And they can't give you an answer, all they did is recite it, then what good does it do? And then I even want to go into the fact that, just like how y'all said that was point number 5 in the third development in the 60s, it was point number 5 in the new Black Panther Party, and it's still point number 5 in the Black Panther Party in San Diego. But let me explain one thing that's a little bit different. What we say is we employ education for our people that exposes the true nature of this devilish, decadent American society. We provide an education that teaches us our true legacy and our role in present day society. So what we're doing, instead of just saying we won't, we are putting ourselves in kinetic, active positions. Therefore, when somebody calls themselves trying to memorize it, so what is it that you're doing? Oh, I'm providing an education that teaches us. Are you actually providing that? You see, it forces me to now articulate and think about what I'm actually saying, because you have to use words of power. What wasn't done back then, and even within the new Black Panther Party, is that we did not apply words of empowerment to the platform. As long as we're talking about what we want and what we believe, we are not we're still approaching it from a passive perspective. We have to force ourselves to view it through active engagement. And so that's a change that has been made here recently, just because we recognize psychological warfare. And we got to be able to see that, because going back to what, like you said, what Ewa hit on, is that the first element in war, period, is I have to know thyself. Bottom line. For every aspect of myself that I don't know when I'm engaging or interacting even in, let's just say, a relationship, same difference. If I don't know how to love myself, then it's impossible for me to love the next person, period. If I am abusive to myself, then anything that I'm going to bring in a relationship is going to be as abusive also. So when we don't, for everything that we don't know about ourselves, when we engage in any position of conflict or any position of activity or active engagement with someone else, then we are setting ourselves up to be taken advantage of. If they know who they are and they know me better than I know myself, then I'm allowing myself to walk into a situation where I will be manipulated and controlled and used in their best interest. So I just wanted to make that point.
True indeed.
You sound a lot like us nowadays, huh, Syke?
Don't he?
We literally had that argument multiple times, changing that one fucking word.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I see. You gonna bite. It's all good.
All right. Next point. And he says that well, you know, because we just talked about that the main function of the party is to awaken the people and teach them the strategic method of resistance. So the next point he goes into, he says, if the party does not make the people aware of the tools and methods of liberation, there will be no means by which the people can mobilize. It will be 100% completely impossible. So the party, again, we going back to what E said in the beginning, that it's a self-indictment, that it's the party's responsibility and duty to teach and educate this concept of revolution to the people. I think it was Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture that said, he said, how did he say it? I be trying to remember the quotes verbatim, but he essentially said that the revolutionary does not make revolution. The people make revolution. The revolutionary guides the people to revolution. It doesn't matter how well you understand revolutionary theory, concepts, ideas. It doesn't matter. You could, if the San Diego chapter of the Black Panther Party had it down packed, but the people are not following their example, then it's useless. So the revolutionary does not make revolution. The people make revolution. It is the revolutionary's job to guide the people to the proper handling of a revolution. And one of the points that did y'all want to speak on that? I almost thought that was just too self-explanatory, but do y'all want to speak on that and give a commentary and a breakdown on that last point?
Well, the masses of the people ain't nowhere near ready to be given any tools for any goddamn thing. Give them a gun. Oh, maybe we're gonna shoot each other. My bad. You know, so I mean, at this point, to me, it becomes more of an internal, you know, that indictment of the party and other organizations who talk about shit. You know, if the tools are not being given, either there's a flaw with who's giving it or a flaw with who's supposed to be receiving it. And at this point, you can have it down pat and take it to them perfectly and roll it out. The mass of the people don't want to hear it, whatever level they're operating in. And that's that Zach Kondo book, by the way.
And this is you went through my bad.
No, go ahead.
This is a point. What you just said is a point, and this is where I call it guerrilla education. And when I was on vacation, I read this essay over and over. I read it a lot, broke it down. And this point right here, he says the main purpose of the Vanguard group, which he keeps reiterating this, but he said the main purpose of the Vanguard group should be to raise the consciousness of the masses through educational programs and other activities. The sleeping masses must be bombarded with the correct approach to struggle, and the party must use all means available to get this information across to the masses. So we have to be creative and almost somewhat conniving to a certain degree to get that information out. One of the things War used to say way back in the day that I never forgot was that you got to trick the people into their liberation. And that's one of the things that we used to use on vacation. That's why I call it guerrilla education, because we'd be on the rec yard working out. And let's go to this, what Huey said about observation and participation. So we'd be on the rec yard working out. Our team, our squad, we called it the God Squad. So our team, you know, would be the biggest, would be the strongest, would be the most intelligent. But when we went out there and worked out, it was uniform. It almost looked like military training. Everybody was on point, in line with each other, and you could see it. And one of the things that they hadn't seen, and I was down there for 17 years, I had never seen anybody else do it myself. So it was new. It was something that was new to see, that level of discipline and that level of strength, even if we didn't even necessarily have it to the degree that it looked like on the rec yard, that other people would see it and they wanted to participate in it. And we use those moments to teach. We'd be working out doing burpees, and then we stop for a rest break, but we call it a teachable moment. All right, everybody want to stop for a teachable moment, and they'd be like, hell yeah, they want to stop. And so we break something down, some scientific, some historical. We'd break it down to allow us to rest, and then we get back to it. Or like we talked about in the previous show, we would infiltrate the religious ceremonies that they had down there, and we would use that to teach these principles and these ideas and these concepts. Me for particular, I would volunteer to do manhood training. They had Quest for Manhood and all kind of other manhood directed classes where I would volunteer to teach those classes, but then basically spit these ideas. Brother Rich, he started participating in the Eastern religion classes, and he would use those Eastern religion classes to teach these concepts. He would use Eastern religious classes to teach principles from ancient Kemet. So we would start guerrilla education. We would start doing what Huey said do, and that's use any means necessary to convey these ideas to the mass of the people. Now, one of the things that I think that we have to look at, because sometimes we could be extremists, and I'm not talking about us necessarily, but our people. We think that if a person is not a mastermind like Malcolm, then he not on it. So we got to understand that we're not supposed to create a whole bunch of brainiacs. We just want to create people that are conscious and aware enough to recognize that we're at war, to understand how to accept the strategies that we give them for resistance, and to basically start moving in a way that's more beneficial toward their people, and to understand and respect our culture. We want a person that's at least aware enough for that, you know.
And that kind of mischievous, almost deceptive approach is to me kind of what it has to happen. But in ways like most folk, especially, you know, baby mamas and daddies, 20, 25, even 30-year-olds, whatever, they got children, but pretty much across the board, say on the weekends, they want to go and kick it. They want to go and have their life, their lifestyle. So just having a Saturday school or Saturday, you know, daycare where you can come drop your kids off for 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever it is. And while you got those children there, you got open, fertile minds who haven't been completely fucked up by this world yet, because their parents are more than likely fucking gone. So in my head, I wrote them off a long time ago and started trying to focus on the babies and putting something in their mind. However, at the same time, there has to be some type of communal experience that follows that up. You know, my oldest children grew up around all of this. And so there was bittersweet, for better or worse. There was a little bit of a communal aspect. They saw a lot of bullshit, unfortunately, which turned them off a whole lot to what, you know, being a part of this shit. They saw the shit we were going through. But having some type of extended family, having some type of extension, because you get a child on Saturdays, and while it's cool to put, and this applies to anybody that comes to, you know, a class during the week, Thursday evening, political and cultural class, whatever, you get that little bit of information, but then you have to go back to the real world. You know, that stuff that y'all said at the meeting and in class and whatnot was cool for the class. It's some good stuff to think about, but I got to go and deal with the reality of what my situation is. And so just like anything else, there has to be some type of support system. And for African people, that's a we. So we have to put ourselves in a position where we have something to build up so that there's always someplace they can come and refresh at, someplace that they can see that what we're saying is actual truth and reality, so that they can then build on that and take that back, as opposed to just adding to the conflict and confusion that they grow up with.
Let me say this, because we got to remember now what made the Black Panther Party the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. It wasn't the weapons, remember that. It was when the Black Panther Party was operating the survival programs. Why? Because when they operated survival programs, you were naturally teaching the people self-sufficiency, but at the same time, what the Black Panther Party is doing is politicizing the people while they have them right there in their grasp. So when we create a situation to where the people are coming around us and we are providing a service to the people through then what we're doing is we're creating that dependency upon us as our own people taking care of each other, as opposed to it being now handed over to the welfare system and now handed over to the government, which all they're doing at that point in time is just creating a codependency that's meant to keep you hooked on the system. Whereas when we are doing for self and teaching that through our survival programs, then what we're doing is creating self-sufficiency. That in itself is going to help implement a concept of power. Number one. Number two, again, now you're politicizing the people because they are around you. So you have access to them to raise their consciousness. And so those are the reasons why Panther headquarters started getting shot up. These are the reasons why the government had to come rush right in and say, hey, we can't have the Panthers in Black community feed themselves. We need to do it in the public education system because we want to indoctrinate them, and we need to add the food to that menu so that it removes that element from the community, and the community don't have that access to the children no more. Hey, we need to break up the Black family and create a welfare system where the man is not in the house, so that they don't have access to be able to realize what it takes to have a balanced family structure. So again, it goes back to identifying where we stand in the social hierarchy as a people. Because if we don't implement power, a position of power, then we will be individualized, and that is a form of weaponization used against a collective people. Right now, we don't see ourselves as a collective. Right now, we suffer from what I would call collective separation anxiety disorder. We ain't trying to hear that shit. Because what we know to be is our allegiance to the United States of America as it is, and all we need to do is fine-tune this son of a bitch and get rid of the quote-unquote few people that are acting out in racism, not seeing it as a systemic problem, because we're not approaching it from the standpoint of a position of collective power as an African people.
And what did the opposition do? What did they do? All they did was study what the Black Panthers were doing. And as Ward just said, that the Black Panther became public enemy number one, not because of the guns. They became public enemy number one because of those survival, what they call them back in the day, survival programs. Because of those survival programs, the free breakfast, the sickle cell anemia clinics. But that free breakfast brought the children in, and then they had access to that garden, to that mine, where they could teach the children. As E just said, I agree 100%, E. I believe that trying to raise the consciousness of the adults is a waste of time. The babies are the greatest. So when you start reaching the babies, as they said, the Black Panthers born in the ghetto every 20 minutes. So when you start reaching those babies, that's where the true revolutionary psychological change takes place. That's where you start indoctrinating those cultural concepts and ideals into the babies. Because a lot of these adults, they are too far gone. All right, next point I'm gonna get into. Because I got a quick bullet point, y'all, of what I think should be applied. But next point he said, and this is one that I always talk about. I think I spoke on it when we was out in San Diego with you, Brother Wall, and we were talking to your chapter privately. But here's one of the points. Here's where I get that from that I thought was very important. But Huey said, the relationship between the Vanguard Party and the masses is a secondary relationship. The relationship among the members of the Vanguard Party is a primary relationship. If the party machinery is to be effective, it is important that the members of the party group maintain a face-to-face relationship with each other. It is impossible to put together functional party machinery or programs without this direct relationship. To minimize the danger of Uncle Tom informers and opportunists, the members of the Vanguard group should be tested revolutionaries. And it's something that he always talk about. He stresses creating that camaraderie, that family-like environment. So what Huey just said was that a party member has to understand he has two relationships. He has a relationship with the party, and he or she has a relationship with the masses. The relationship with the masses, even though the entire organization was constructed and formed in order to raise the consciousness of the masses, we have to understand that relationship with the masses is a secondary relationship, and that the relationship to the party is a primary relationship. And that relationship has to be fed. It has to be cultivated, as Huey said, with face to face. That it has to be that he said that if the party machinery is to be effective, it is important that the members of the party group maintain a face-to-face relationship with each other. It is impossible to put together functional party machinery or programs without this direct relationship. And to minimize Uncle Toms and sellouts coming into the party structure, they have to all be tried revolutionaries. And that last sentence can mean to you whatever you think that means. That means that if me and E and me and War has this face-to-face relationship where we're actually building bonds and creating this camaraderie, even though I've grown a love and a certain level of respect for Brother War or Brother E, I still have to make sure that they're tried revolutionaries, to make sure that we're dealing with people that can stand 10 toes down and be on the up and up. That's essentially what I take from what he's saying in that passage.
And it's funny to me, kind of building on what you mentioned earlier, that all he's saying is the same shit. He's talking about we.
Yeah.
He's starting that cultural shit at a very micro level, just in the party. Let's get Africa back in the mix. And it really sucks that they couldn't see that at the time, that you can't build camaraderie with cats who are primarily concerned with their own individual gain. It's just not going to work. That's illogical as hell and doesn't work anywhere in physics at all. So an attempt to develop that camaraderie without some sense of our culture, not the cultural blackface that we put on, and not understanding how racism, white supremacy works, and that it's a culture that it's funny. I'm sitting up thinking about the idea of racism, white supremacy, and looking for examples around the world and in the community as to kind of illustrate what it is. And the more I look, the more insidious or the more accepted it is. If you had a class war and you told your class to jump online and grab a map of a globe, a global map, a map of the earth, said, y'all, everybody grab a map and bring it to class with you, we're going to use it. 9 times out of 10, every map, more than that, every map they bring in is going to be that, Mercator map, that map that shows Africa way small and all of the European nations and whatnot really, really big. That's racism, white supremacy. How you say? Because it's a tactic to impose this idea of white supremacy. All the white nations or countries are really big. All the little brown ones are small and insignificant. That's what racism, white supremacy is. And we don't have any idea of that because it's been individualized. Somebody calling you a nigger, that's racism. No, it's not. That's silliness. Don't even waste your time with that shit. But they, and I kind of get it, because the whole idea of we and that concept of us being a people, and if you think about it, this country is built upon definitely on individual rights, individual private ownership, But then it turns around in its paperwork and says we the people. Well, the people is a group. The group is not concerned with individual rights. The group is concerned with the rights of the group. So, and that's some of that trickery that they do. They talk about individual rights and you being part of the people. Those don't go together. Either you got people rights and you got people, a government of the people. So even just with those simple things that we take for granted, we get lost just in the words. We lose the entirety of it in that shit. But that was funny to me. But they had that advantage that we don't have. That prior to integration, or what we call integration, African people still had a sense of identity. You still get, if you got in trouble at school, that whole, we've heard the story, you get in trouble at school, you might get pops. On the way home, you pass by Miss What's-Her-Name house, you get in trouble there. You go into your house, you get in trouble there. that whole idea that they tried to co-opt of it takes a group, it takes a community to raise a child. We still had that. It was being phased out. And like I said, to me, the last straw was the integration. Now we get to go be around white folks, which is what we've been told freedom is, to go do what white folks do. And we accepted that. But they still had some sense of belonging to a group of people, that cohesion. We still identified. We don't identify with that anymore. So that, to me, all Huey was talking about in that idea is that, yeah, this is the shit that we were trying to do back with the Naughty Naughty back in the day. Not build an organization and then get people to be comrades. Now, hook up with the cats that you real with and have an affinity for, and build from that. Infuse your ideas in that and let that grow as you meet others who have similar mindsets, and build with them, and it grows. So that those principles are already a part of who they are. This is how they act. This is how they behave, as opposed to doing it the Christian way and being told, okay, you're fucked up. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, do this way. You're supposed to love Jesus sincerely, which is an impossibility. You're supposed to want to be with black folks sincerely. If I got to tell you to do it and you do it, you're not doing it sincerely because you want to do it. That's shit Malcolm was talking about. If you force a white man to come up and put his arm around me, then that's not brotherhood. If he comes up because of his sheer will and wants to put his arm around me and say, hey, we brothers, that's sincerity. So we have to find that sincerity amongst one another and build around that. And that sincerity comes from a cultural identity, which is what Huey was talking about. And you're right, that shit still baffles me, that as intelligent as these brothers and sisters were and are, can't see that shit is just so fucking obvious that our culture is missing. We have a culture of separation. Everything we do is designed to separate us. Everything. And so to counter that, we have to indoctrinate, just like he's talking about, that primary conversation. Even the masses of the people, we have to have that primary relationship has to be between us. Our relationship with white folk will come after, because until we have that relationship amongst us, we have no power to go to them with. We'll be on their titty again. What's his name? LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, is purported to have said that with these government programs and shit, if they enact them, the Democratic Party, integration, the votes and all of that shit, if they give that shit to these niggas, they'll have us voting for the Democratic Party for the next 100 years. And lo and behold, here we are. They trying to wrestle black folk away. Trump trying to get black folk away from the Democratic Party, because it's nothing but it lays its teat out there. So we keep sucking from their titty, thinking that we're making some kind of progress. And that's kind of what your boy Forth used to talk about. He would vote for a Republican because it seemed like when Republicans were in office, we were much more geared toward being conscious minded. We'd be like, oh shit, we got to get some shit together. We got to get shit right. And we'd have a little bit more of a tendency to come together. Whereas when there was a Democrat there, it was like, oh, this white daddy's going to take care of us. We all good. And we sit back and we feed off of their titty and feed from them rather than looking to one another. So yeah, it still baffles me how that whole cultural aspect, they were doing it, feeding the children, getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning to go make eggs for some kid you don't know, but you know that kid. That's us. That's what we do. They were practicing the shit that the culturalists were talking about. It's the same fucking shit. Yep. And that's why I say those two have to be. We're not going to inspire people by telling people that we're fucked up. Shit's fucked up. It's fucked, and that's really all the party does. It's fucked up, y'all. It's fucked up. We need to have programs. It's fucked up. But we're not instituting it beyond saying it's fucked up. You can unite people around the grandiosity of African people and what we've done. I've seen people get wired up about that. But people don't really get wired up in a forward-moving way when you talk about how the police are fucking us up or what we ain't got. That shit's depressing as hell. That's one of the things we used to talk about back in the day. It's just depressing as hell. I don't want to keep reading about motherfuckers losing the fight. Show me something about motherfuckers that won the fight someplace, because we did win fights against these Specklewoods back in the day. We won a lot of fucking fights. Remember, it took hundreds of years for them to conquer Kemet. And that was after we started infighting in Kemet. That's what led to that. It wasn't just white folks came in one day and wiped us out. It was hundreds of years after we were already infighting. We were already fucking up. But even with that, there were brothers and sisters who went toe to toe and had white folks shaking in their boots, scared to death to come past this line, coming down the Nile. Whoa, we're not going any further because them some real niggas back there. We're not gonna fuck with them. We're gonna be happy with what we got back up here. And that type of shit will move people forward. I remember getting hyped off of Shaka Zulu. It fucked up as that movie was when I was in high school. That shit was dope. Watching them brothers run. They run 40 miles, go fight a fight, run 40 miles back home. What the fuck? As dope as the shit, Syke was doing when he was on vacation. It ain't got shit on that. No. You 40 miles, go and fight a fight and then run home. That's some real shit.
Yeah.
And you can move with people with that type of shit, but you can't move with people just always begging and asking, come be a part of this, come do this, come do. No. At some point, it has to be, this is what we're going to do for you. And when they see us doing for them, they're going to turn around and reciprocate. I don't care who you are. I don't care what kind of fucked up drug dealing, drugged out, 40 baby mamas and baby daddies. And I don't care what your situation is. When motherfucker starts doing shit for you, there's going to be at least a little bit of, I want to do something for this. I want to, pay some of that back. You create a sense of obligation.
And ironically, since you brought up Shaka, I love Shaka. That's one of my guys. They say that even to this day, the Zulu Army under Shaka still holds the record of the most miles ran by an army in a day. And you know how Shaka was. Shaka, if his people started dragging and BSing, he would actually send somebody to go kill them. They can't be Zulu warriors. He'd actually have them taken out. But Shaka himself, when he heard that his mother was dying, They said that he ran 90 miles in a day. So he didn't require nothing of his army that he couldn't do and outdo. You know what I'm saying? Okay, but the next point, Ward, unless you got something to say on that last point that Brother E built on. Okay, the next point, I'm not gonna read it, I'm just gonna explain it. The next point he explains, because we just talked about the relationship between the party and the members of the party, and then the members of the party and the people in the community. Now he says that, and this is another point that I used to like to build on real tough. He said in the beginning that the party, and I think that the party missed the point when it was supposed to do this. I think the party was split between understanding revolutionary science and then taking this next step and wanting to stay as a functional above ground organization. But essentially what Huey says in this point is that in the beginning, the party has to operate as an above ground organization. And as an above ground political organization, it would have to, as he expressed many times throughout this essay, that the party's primary responsibility to the people is to raise the consciousness of the people, and you cannot do that underground. You cannot raise the consciousness of the people if the people do not know you exist. So you have to be above ground, teaching, educating, feeding, and building with the people until you're ran underground. He said that you have to accept that the inevitability that the government is going to run you underground because the things you're saying and the things that you are doing are extremely dangerous to the status quo. They're going to come after you. And when that happens, that's when you have to go underground and actually start implementing the physical levels of the revolution. And he used, in this same passage, while I didn't read it, he uses Fidel Castro and what happened in Cuba. He started out at the university teaching, speaking, building until they ran him into the hills. The same thing you can find over and over and over again historically throughout all revolutions. It starts off above ground and then you ran underground. And that's one of the points that he make at this point. And he says in order to operate as a revolutionary, you have to accept that death is inevitable. If you cannot accept that, then you cannot operate as a revolutionary. And when they start shooting up Panther headquarters, when they start arresting all the members, that's when you start a split happen between the party, or that's when you start seeing it more visually, because you had more people on the East Coast that understood this revolutionary concept and they tried to go underground. They formed the BLA and tried to operate from that perspective. Then you had a lot more on the West Coast that were trying to maintain a for lack of a better word, Nation of Islam-esque type of organization. What I mean by that is an above ground organization still operating in the same function, but Panther headquarters are being shot up. So basically, essentially the point, he said that revolutionaries have to understand that they are going to come for you. And when that happens, you got to start above ground in order to teach the people. And then when they come for you, you have to take it underground and actually start implementing the physical methods of the revolution once they come out to you. So what do you brothers got to say on that?
Let me start off by basically saying, and I just want to give it a definition, the whole concept of counterinsurgency. I think what we have to take, if we analyze that for what it was, is that we were not prepared and not aware of to what depth the government had in terms of the tools available to them to actually see what was going on. Even though we made these analyses, the thing is what we didn't expect is for them to cause us to prematurely have to go underground. So again, them seeing the potential of what was going on with the party and where it would inevitably we go, because they recognize that what you're talking about is you're talking about the government recognizing the fact that we allow black folks to be self-sufficient, just like what happened way before the party. Anytime a black community became self-sufficient, became prosperous, and started being able to organize and do things on a level to where it didn't need the government, it didn't need white folks to have anything to do with it, they attacked. The party didn't see themselves basically falling under the same pattern that we've constantly fell under in the United States. Here, every time we prosper, is I see where this is headed, so I'm going to go ahead and strike it ahead of time. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate it before it gets to that position. And so what we have to realize, again, that's why I go back to the concept of saying, realizing you already at war. You realize you already at war, you know you're on the battlefield already. So therefore, you ain't gonna just basically be able to set up this nice, drawn, elaborate process out and think that just because you're not doing anything to be aggressive, that they're not gonna go ahead and launch an attack against you, because they see what's going on. They see where you're headed. And so from that standpoint, they drove the party underground prematurely. They was not going to allow the party to connect with the people the way that it was attempting to do it. And they tried to blame it and try to frame it as if it was communist influenced by the Russians and whatever else they could try to get a hold of in order to make it legitimate and to deal with it. And remember this also, it wasn't just the local police department, but it was FBI, it was the CIA, it was the naval intelligence, army intelligence. We have military intelligence interacting and doing what they could do to stop the Panthers. What other organization do you know have the military intervening in their operations? And so it's not just a little local thing. When the military is enacted to come against you, then that definitely lets you know that they see this and see where it's going in terms of the type of potential and power that it can have. So I just want to draw that out, that what we're talking about is the counterinsurgency and the fact that the United States government saw that if you allow black people to be able to be self-sufficient, it's like realizing that, well, if they are self-sufficient and they give themselves a position of power, why would they not do what we did to them? Why would they not do it to us? And so from that standpoint, I think that's always what the white element is going to fear, is that are black folks not going to do the same thing or get back at us for doing what we've constantly done for them for generations and generations? Because it would be fair if black folks were to do this to us. So why give them the opportunity and the ability to begin to act on what is actually fair and righteous if they were to get in power?
Well, I would somewhat disagree on various points. Tell you why. Depending on what time period you look at, say, okay, Huey and them in that time period, the U.S. military was much more sophisticated and zeroed in than they were on somebody like Garvey during his time. But the lengths that they went to disrupt and destroy it were no less militaristic. Go back even further than that, when you're talking about cats in so-called slave days who had, you had the police, you may have had, there were, Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and other rebellions and revolutions and uprisings that took place that called in whatever the military looked like at that point in time. A lot of times it was just a bunch of rednecks with guns. A lot of times it was the organized sheriff's department on the down low. It was whatever military was available at that time. But I think that going underground, doing anything underground, especially once you've been above ground today, is a pipe dream. We live in a surveillance state where you can't take a shit without them knowing about it. And so I think that there are elements that have to be developed, put into place, created, nurtured, cultivated prior to going above ground. Again, back in Huey's time, there was an underground to run to. Underground depends on the people having your back. You know, Castro was actually underground when he was teaching at schools, at the university. He became above ground when he went to the hills because they knew, okay, this motherfucker, we know where he's at, we know what he's about, we know what he's doing. Now he's on our radar. If he's teaching at a class, one person teaching classes at a university can get away with a lot more education than a group showing up to do any fucking thing. It just doesn't draw as much attention, and it gets written off as a crackpot or whatever. There are hundreds of those all over the country as we speak. In fact, what we were doing back in the day with the 90 is some of what, in my mind, because we don't have the same elements in our community that they had during their time, to sit up in one another's house and have those conversations, put down on paper and figure out different types of organization and to put together plans, programs, and then connect with other people on the down low and to begin to put in this infrastructure first. You know, because that was the big issue. Huey and them, they were isolated. As much as the people loved them, they were isolated. They knew exactly who to come for. You know, even with that culture of some level of unity in the community being there that we don't have anymore, they still had some level of somewhere that they could run to. We don't really have that anymore. So there are parts of what we've got to do that have to be taken care of before we step foot out the door yelling, "I'm a revolutionary." Well, you just get isolated and shot. I mean, it's what is it? It's programmatic. It's like they have an algorithm for that shit now. Somebody comes out and says, "Hey, we need Black Power." Womp womp womp. Okay, Institute Program 1289. Click, and the mechanisms go into play to take care of them. You isolate them, threaten them, pay them off, put them in jail, whatever. They got a checklist of, okay, this guy can be bought off. This guy will have to go to jail. This dude, we just gonna have to kill this motherfucker because he won't shut the fuck up. You know, that shit is already there. So jumping out and being out there, because it's not gonna garner, again, going back to what catches the masses of the people's imagination, jumping out there and saying, hey, here we are, is not really gonna work in the same way it would have worked then, because we have a totally different dynamic. And so I think that it has to be reversed, and that underground, if we're gonna rely on it to any degree, or even rely on develop anything above ground, has to be laid in place. Again, I'm gonna go back to the schools. You put together a little Saturday school. Oh, they just got a little, Saturday school. Maybe it's on Fridays and Thursdays. They have some times on there. They ain't shit. They ain't doing nothing. But the whole time, you're underground. They don't realize, like you was doing, Sight, in when you was on vacation. You putting this shit together in front of their face, but under the ground. They don't realize what's going on. You keep that shit hush hush. And when you get to a certain point, then you come out and say, okay, cool, we got it. We got some finances in place. We got some education going on, and we got guns. We can at least hold our own to some degree. So now we're going to come out. The folks that are in the party that are doing the work are educated on culture and ways that the enemy works. They're learning themselves. They're learning the enemies. So now because they worked underground to get the information right, to get their heads right, to do what they needed to do to set this shit up both internally as well as whatever programs they're going to want to do. That's been done. Now there's something for them to step out onto, Right now, we ain't got nothing to step out onto. It's just air. So for me, that time has kind of flipped that. Like I said, there's no underground. Where the fuck is the underground? When they can track you without leaving a room, without even putting a person on it. Computer program can tell where you work, having never met you. They'll know where you work, where your girlfriend house at, what liquor store you like to stop at. They'll know all of that shit. They'll know what kind of Amazon shit you like to buy. They'll know everything. They'll know your DNA without you even knowing it. Maybe because you